Today I'm going to show you really quickly how to get set up for watercolors. You're going to need your palette, you're going to need your brushes, a paper towel, a dish with water, some tape. This is your watercolor paper, and I'm actually using the back of my newsprint pad for its hard cardboard. You're going to be taping the watercolor paper down to this pad so that when you get it wet, it will remain flat, and as it dries, it will dry flat and cause less wrinkles, and it'll look and be a lot nicer. Step one is just to simply tape down a single sheet of the watercolor paper to this board. Now what you want to do is you want to tape it in a way, if you want to try to get two sheets on at a time, you could move it this way, that way. You're able to work two sheets at a time, so I would probably recommend doing that. For today, we're just going to tape down one piece. So very simply, I'm taking my masking tape and I'm taping the edge down all the way around. You'll notice that half the masking tape is on the board, half of it is over the watercolor paper, making nice, even, straight lines, as straight as you can make them. This masking tape will be taken off, so you don't want to leave it on for a very long time, but I'll show you when we take it off how to do a nice job of that, of taking it off. But this is just making sure that the paper is completely flat. The next step is to wash your brushes. Brushes come with a sizing on it. It's sort of like a glue that makes the brushes look really nice, but that has to be washed off of the brush before you can use it. So I use soapy water. I push the brush around in the palm of my hand, and then I go ahead and I rinse it off. You do this to all of the brushes in your kit. You can do them all at once, then that way you don't have to worry about the sizing being on them. The next thing you're going to want to do is activate your watercolors. Now, as they dry out, they have a tendency to crack and chip, and they can fall out of the palettes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some water over these colors in the palettes so that it re-moistens them and gets them ready to use. So I'm just simply putting some color on top. Now I'm rinsing my brush so that it doesn't, I don't contaminate each of the colors. So I'm rinsing my brush, I'm putting water on the top. I'm not putting a ton of water, but I'm using this nice flat brush to get enough water that these watercolors are going to soften up and they're going to stick better to the palette. As you use these, they'll get better and better as you use more of them and you activate them with water. So it's simple as that. When you're done, this is why we have a paper towel. I gotta kind of dry up some of this area here. So I'm gonna let that water soak in for a bit. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a wash of color on my watercolor paper. Now this isn't necessary every single time you do watercolors. However, I find it to be really a lot more interesting if when I start doing watercolors, I have a graded wash on my paper of a color. This ends up making it easier to kind of create a rich, layered look. So on the first piece of paper that I'm using, you'll see that I'm using a combination of very, very wet paint and then just water. So I'm not even applying more paint. I'm just moving water around to kind of create a smooth, somewhat smooth gradient on this watercolor paper. Once I put down a bit, then I don't go back and grab, because what I want is I want to maintain a look where I have some whites. I don't want to have completely a dark color. I want to have lights in there. But what this is going to do is this is going to get my paper ready to accept more watercolor. And again, it's going to create a really interesting look that has some depth and dimension. It's something that isn't very easy to achieve if you don't have layers of paint, of different colors of paint on your watercolor paper. So this is just a graded wash. That's what this technique is. If I want to, in some areas, I can make it darker. I might, just to add some variety, change the color in a few areas. But again, I'm going to eventually take this and just use some water to sort of just wash that out. I'm not trying not to use a ton of water because I don't want to get my paper too wet. But again, I'm covering the entire page with that tone. Just something like that. Now I'm going to let this dry completely overnight, and this is going to create the surface that I will then use for painting.